Welcome to our legal series on issues facing the veterinary sector. Victoria and I are here with Omer today talking about immigration matters.
Hi, great to be here.
So Omer, how can immigration help with startups?
Yeah, it's a good question because it wouldn't be obvious that it would be the first thing that a startup would be thinking about. Speaking to our clients, what we've really found is that their day one struggle is recruitment. Where we can get involved is helping them with a sponsor license. It really gives the impression that the license is some sort of government approval to hire people, but it's a lot more than that. It's actually a gateway that allows you to interact with the Home Office. It's highly regulated because the Home Office is super keen to make sure that it's not misused. This sponsor license will help you recruit from overseas, recruit non-UK nationals. And what we've really found in the veterinary space and in the healthcare space is that this opens up a world of possibilities in terms of recruitment. They can recruit from anywhere outside of the UK. It used to be that staff would just be able to come and work in the UK from the EU, and that's no longer the case now. That means that recruitment really has gone global, and we're finding people coming in, particularly in the veterinary space, from outside of the EU. Whilst it might not be an early consideration, if recruitment is a challenge, it's a good route to look at.
I've heard a lot of talk amongst vets that sponsorship can be very expensive. Is that the case?
It can be. When a business is starting out and it has so many upfront costs, I think the prospect of then having to pay for a sponsor license and to have to pay other charges to hire a skilled worker on a sponsor license visa, I think that can be quite daunting. And certainly those costs have gone up in recent years. But why am I still advocating this route? Well, we found a bit of a workaround. Traditionally, employers have paid the costs for themselves and for the applicants. But now what we're doing is we're asking applicants to sort of share the cost burden as well. That doesn't mean that they've got to pay thousands of pounds straight away either. But what we do suggest is that if the employer, if the practice pays the employee costs on their behalf and then treat that amount as a loan, the individual can slowly pay that back. We found that to not only help with the cost burden initially from the applicant's perspective, but also to make that applicant really sticky to that practice. So, they've got some skin in the game. They know that their fees have been paid and they've got to pay them back. That can ensure longevity, that they do stay with the practice for the full 5 years.
Thanks, Omer. That addresses some of the startup questions, but what about salary going forward? What do we have to pay our vets?
Okay, so this is a big number. It's 40,800 for a vet or a veterinary surgeon. That's a regulated amount as a minimum that must be paid. But there are a couple of loopholes. And one of the things that we can suggest, and this is pretty good news, is that that number can be reduced by 30%. And the ways that can happen are primarily to look to see if you can recruit a UK graduate. And there are other routes to go down as well, such as creating a training role. So just to look at those two separately. Firstly, the graduate route is super because it doesn't even require sponsorship for the first 2 years. So if you can find someone who's done their undergraduate course in the UK, it could also be masters, it could be their PhD, then that discount on the salary rate, that applies immediately, and you've got none of the sponsorship costs. Vets really like this because they've got that 2-year period to sort of test the water with the individual, work out whether they're a good fit for the practice, and then the practice can decide, yes, I want to invest in this individual. I will pay for the sponsor license. I will pay for their skilled worker visa. And when they do, then they'll still get the discounted rate over the 5-year period. I also appreciate that in a startup, you're going to want more experienced people in the business as well. You're not necessarily going to want to look at just graduates. What we can do there is, if the practice still introduces an element of training into the role, then that loophole that I mentioned, that can still apply. And you can still get the 30% discount off the salary cost.
So thinking about the application process, what documents would a veterinary practice need to have in place to apply for sponsorship?
The number one document that they would need is the certificate from their regulatory body. That's a mandatory document. Other than that, then the things that they would need are the things that the startup would be putting into place anyway. Business bank account, PAYE registration, VAT registration. That's going to take you to 4 documents. The story doesn't end with the documents. There's a particular form of presentation that has to be sort of pulled together to make this a really appealing application to the Home Office. That's kind of where we come in to put all of that together. But that's also where clients really appreciate the fact that we offer a fully managed fixed price service, specifically for startups, so they can focus on growing and managing their business, and we can take care of this whole application process for them.
So any other tips for veterinary startups?
There's been a lot of talk about illegal working, and so I would encourage any startup practice to be right on top of right to work checks from the outset. Fortunately, they're a lot easier now than they used to be. There's something called an employee share code, which the new hire can give to you as a business. You can go to government portal, tap that in. It will tell you whether or not the person that you're interviewing can actually work for you. If that throws up any queries, there's a secondary service that you can use. It's called the employer checking service. That will give you a bit more information on whether or not that person has got an application in the system, or whether there's some other problem that perhaps hasn't been disclosed to you. It is a mandatory requirement to do these checks before the person starts working for you. But it's also really good practice, because if we do it early enough and it throws out the issues, it means that we can catch them before they actually start working for us. I've had an instance just recently where the information that was given to the employer, it didn't match with what they had explained at an interview. So it's actually by doing these twofold checks that we actually realised that this person had lost the right to work in the UK. So that's one thing I'd say to consider at the outset. The second is probably less well known, but could be a really good employment solution. If you have somebody that is sponsored, say, at another practice, they can actually do additional hours for your practice, and that then avoids all of the sponsorship costs. The only banana skin to look out for on that is that it's really important that the applicant is actually fulfilling the requirements of their original role. What we are starting to see are people that have perhaps been sponsored, been let go, and then are trying to do supplementary work elsewhere and sort of sidestep the whole sponsorship route. That's particularly problematic. So you just need to make a few inquiries about that and make sure that the person is doing their primary role. If they are, they can come and work in your practice.
Thanks, Omer.
Oh, you're really welcome. We're really excited about being involved in this initiative with you.